slides, you know we're going to be looking at the life of King Hezekiah. You can start making your way over to 2 Chronicles chapter 31. We had a little bit of left from last week, didn't quite get finished, so I'll touch on that a little bit, but that's in chapter 30, but we're going to spend, I think, the majority of our time in chapter 31. Life of King Hezekiah. Go ahead. We're going to talk about more reforms, so I'm still highlighting those biblical passages. In fact, let's go to the very end of chapter 31. I'm going to read this passage here, sort of a summary passage about King Hezekiah and all that he did as king of Judah. It says in verse 20, 2 Chronicles 31:20, thus King Hezekiah did throughout all Judah. What did he do? Well, that's what we're going to look at tonight. It's sort of like, so this is all that King Hezekiah did throughout all of Judah. And he did what was good and right and true before the Lord his God. You know, I hope that I could live up to that statement so you could put it on my tombstone. He did what was good and right and true before the Lord his God. That'd be a good statement about someone's life. And in every work that he began in the service of the house of the Lord, so a lot of the things that he did was about reforming, cleaning out the temple and getting it back, quote, online, a place of worship again. Remember his father, King Ahaz, had shut the doors, stripped it of all of its, or a lot of its gold and silver and the precious furnishings there, and used that to pay off the king of Assyria. And so King Hezekiah ordered and had it all put back in place and ready for worship. And he, in the service of the Lord, then in the law and in the commandment, one thing that we notice about King Hezekiah's life is he was a man of the book. He went back to the Word of God. They had the Word of God then. They had the law, not all of it, not all the Old Testament, but a lot of it they had. They had the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and probably some of the others. And but he checked his work in accordance to, as we would say today, the Bible. To seek his God, and he did it with all of his heart. So that means he did it with his heart. So this wasn't just a, quote, going through the motions and just doing things to get things done. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about his rulership. He didn't ask them to make a statue of him at the end of his rulership and put his name on it. No, he didn't do that. He just gave it all to God in his heart. And it also means the idea of fervently. He did it with He did it with gusto. He did it because he wanted to. And as I always say, I never have problems getting up early enough to go fishing. Sometimes I have problems getting up early enough to go to work. But when your heart's in it, you never have any problems making whatever sacrifice. And then he prospered. The Lord prospered him because of what he did. Hezekiah was a good man, a good king, and very much like King David in a lot of ways. Next slide. So I've said a lot of this already. This is where we've been. He cleansed the temple, restored the worship. Chapter 29, the first worship service, latter part of chapter 29. We got started with the observing of the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread. They all went together. Passover was 14th day. 7 days after that, Feast of Unleavened Bread. There was a great emphasis on the purity, personal purity, when it comes to worshiping the Lord and doing things according to the law of God. Now, this is where we left off. So we're going to just jump in at chapter 30, verse 21. And I'm going to read, well, somebody else want to read? You want to read verses 21 through 27? Anybody? Who's got the mics tonight? Vanessa's got one. Who said they'd read? Glenn said he would read, so bring him a mic. And Glenn said he would read there. So 21 through 27, chapter 30. So this is what we didn't quite get done.
So the children of Israel who were present at Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with great gladness. And the Levites and priests praised the Lord day by day, singing to the Lord, accompanied by the loud instruments. And Hezekiah gave encouragement to all the Levites who taught the good knowledge of the Lord. And they ate throughout the feast 7 days, offering peace offerings and making confession to the Lord God of their fathers. And then the whole assembly agreed to keep the feast another 7 days. And they kept it another 7 days with gladness. For Hezekiah the king of Judah gave to the assembly 1,000 bulls, 7,000 sheep, and the leaders gave to the assembly 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep, and a great number of priests sanctified themselves. And the whole assembly of Judah rejoiced, and the priests, also the priests and Levites, all the assembly that came from Israel, the sojourners who came from the land of Israel, and those who dwelt in Judah. So there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the time of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, there had not been nothing like this in Jerusalem. Then the priests, the Levites, arose and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came up to his holy dwelling place, to heaven.
Okay, so 7 days, and it seems that what was going on was everything that we kind of read about the Passover day was repeated 7 days. They did it for seven consecutive days. When they got done with those 7 days, they were so joyful and so glad, they said, let's go 7 more days. How many of you have ever been a part of a revival that got extended 7 more days? Michelle's one. I can't say I have either. It probably shows my spiritual condition, but they were so excited. They loved this so much. I mean, let's put ourselves in their shoes. After we get done with Sunday worship, 12 o'clock, we just say, let's just do that all over again. Let's just go back to Sunday school. Let's have another Sunday school lesson. Let's sing some more. Let the preacher preach again. And they did that for 7 days, 7 more days. It was a great revival, a great moment in the nation of Israel. And it says there, I was looking at that, it says the Levites taught them, they sang together, they ate together, and they prayed together. That sounds like a good day to me. Sounds like a great day. So when it talks about them eating together, these were you remember those peace offerings, that Thanksgiving offerings that I talked about? Well, you could eat of those. You could eat of those offerings, and that's what they were talking about. Verse 24 talks about more offerings were given. And these were not cheap items. And I don't know what a sheep costs now, but they were pricey possessions. And so when they would give these things, and we'll learn that King Hezekiah dug into his pocket and gave a lot of the offerings that were offered during this time. Worshiping the Lord has an expense, and we must be willing to pay that expense. We shouldn't, how did David say, I will not worship the Lord with that which costs me nothing? We must give sacrificially to the Lord. All right, let's go to the next slide. So verse 24 talks about the great number of priests who sanctified themselves. Remember, there was a reluctance. There was a reluctance on the priest to give the appropriate offerings and to go through the appropriate steps of getting cleansed, holified, sanctified, so that they could step up and fill their place in the worship of the Lord. And I think this probably has to do with, if you go back to King Hezekiah's day, a lot of these priests had become idolatrous, and they didn't want to go back to the worship of the Lord. There were some holdouts, but we see that there were others that were coming along. And one thing about revival, it's contagious. You can, when you see other people revived and you see the church on fire for the Lord, it spreads, and that's a good thing. That's a contagion we'll take. We'll take that kind of contagion. So, not since the days of Solomon, it says, what is that, verse 25, 26? Not since the days of Solomon. What's he talking about? Well, this was the dedication of the temple. So you go back to 2 Chronicles chapter 6 and 7. This was the time when the temple was dedicated to the Lord for the first time. Remember, Shekinah glory and all that. And it says, there's not been services like that in the temple since Solomon's day. That's pretty incredible. Next slide. So the 2-week revival service finally closes, verse 27, and the priest pronounces a blessing upon the people. I can't say for sure, but I know that in Numbers chapter 6, you may recognize it. Numbers chapter 6, verses 23 through 27, the Lord gave Aaron, this Aaron was still living back then, gave Aaron the way to bless the people. Here's what he says. He says, this is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, and here's the blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. It's a beautiful blessing. This is a pronouncement of a wish or a prayer. It's a desire. This is what we want for you. These were the words of the Lord. And so I hope, I don't know this for sure, but I sort of expect that that's what they heard when this service ended. But the revival, maybe the services had ended, but the revival had not ended. Now we go to chapter 31. Next slide. So chapter 31, we'll kind of walk through it and look at it. The zeal, the revival zeal that the people had in chapter 30 continued into chapter 31, and we read, and now when all this was finished, all Israel who were present went out to the cities of Judah. So they went home. They were in Jerusalem. So they went home and broke the sacred pillars in pieces and cut down the wooden images and threw down the high places and the altars from all Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Wait, did you see that? Well, I know Judah and Benjamin, that's Judah. That's the southern kingdom. But if you remember, Hezekiah had invited people from the northern kingdom, Ephraim and Manasseh, and Zebulun and Naphtali and Asher and some of those other places. And the thing about the northern kingdom of the nation of Israel, they were as far from God as they could possibly be, but there were some people at the invitation of Hezekiah, they came and they went home and they destroyed their idols. So in King Hezekiah's reign, in King Ahaz's reign, Hezekiah's father, the Bible tells us, it's over in 2 Chronicles 28, that there was an idol on every hill and under every green tree. There was idols everywhere. People had their own house idols, and idols here and idols there and idols at that corner and on that hill and under that oak tree and that pecan tree and that peach tree. There was an idol everywhere. And so they went home and throughout the cities of Judah, and they began to clean things up like had happened in Jerusalem. You know, it kind of made me think this way, is that a lot of times we kind of get cleaned up and we come to church and we do our church thing, and then we go back home to all of our sinful idols. We ought to go home and take what we learn from God's Word while we're at church and apply them at our homes, like these people did. They went to Jerusalem, quote, went to church. They learned there idolatry is not to be in the nation of Israel. And so they went home and they cleaned up idolatry. At least some of them did. Next slide. Okay, so verse 2, it says, and Hezekiah, so back to what Hezekiah was doing. And Hezekiah appointed the divisions of the priests and the Levites according to their divisions, each man according to his service, the priests and the Levites for burnt offerings and peace offerings, to serve, to give thanks, and to praise in the gates of the camp of the Lord. So the divisions of the priest. So they were still trying to get things organized and together. You know, they've only been at this a couple of months, and all of this has already happened. And so Hezekiah went to work, and he's following the pattern of King David. So I gave you some references there. The initial ordering of the priest, there's a lot of places in Leviticus, but I pointed you to Numbers chapter 18 if you want to look at that later. But really what I think is going on is Hezekiah is resurrecting, he's bringing back that order, the 24 divisions of the priesthood that David put in place. That's in 1 Chronicles 23 and 24. And so you can read all of that, and there's a lot of names, and I can't quote all those names, but there's 24 orders. And there's differences of opinion, okay? So if you go by a lunar calendar, if these guys served 2 weeks, you would work your way through all the divisions. So you served in Jerusalem at the temple for 2 weeks, and then you went home. Now, some say it was done monthly, and I can't really decide, and the Bible's not very clear on it. Nonetheless, what's being done is you have these divisions of priests, and so they took their turn serving at Jerusalem. And you see this in the birth of John the Baptist. You remember Zechariah? He was taking his turn when he was at the temple, and he was getting to go, maybe for the first time in his life, I don't know, but he was getting to go into the Holy of Holies, and well, it's actually the holy place. He wasn't going in the Holy of Holies, where the altar of incense was. And while he was offering that, the Lord appeared to him, or an angel of the Lord appeared to him. And so this is what's going on. And Hezekiah is putting the priests back in their divisions. Now, when they went home, they still served as priests. They would serve in the teaching ministry. They would serve as judges for the people. So if people had disagreements or whatever, they would go to the local priest. And so they were still working, but they only got to serve in Jerusalem probably 2 weeks out of the year. So, again, I think we see Hezekiah doing things according to God's Word. You know, if you remember when God was giving Moses the law, it's over in Deuteronomy chapter 17, he said to Moses, Moses, there's going to come a day and Israel's going to have a king. It was God's design for Israel to have a king. I know that we don't think so, because we think of King Saul, don't we? And, you know, they rejected God for being king. Well, God had David chosen in eternity past, and he knew that there was going to be a king in Israel one day. And he said, this is what a king is supposed to do. Of the many things he's supposed to do, here's one thing he's supposed to do. He was to have a copy of the law at his throne, and he was to read it. And I just suspect that's what Hezekiah did. I suspect that Hezekiah and probably with some help of some priests and some scribes and such, and he went over to Deuteronomy. What's king supposed to be like? Well, let's start at Deuteronomy 17. Oh, I'm supposed to have a copy of the law. Okay, you get a copy of the law. Now, that's the first thing I got to get. And he read that thing. And so he constantly was careful to make sure that he did things according to the Word of God. Good lesson for us. Next slide. So verse 3, and the king also appointed a portion of his possessions. Here's where we see King Hezekiah giving from his own pocket for the burnt offerings, for the morning and evening offering. So that a morning offering, sin offering, evening offering, sin offering is for the whole nation, every morning, every evening. Burnt offerings for the Sabbath. Every Sabbath had special offerings. New moons, that's every month. And set feast, well, that could be the Passover, Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles, different feasts throughout the calendar year, as it was written in the law of the Lord. And so King Hezekiah gave from his own possessions. And I don't like this lesson, but you teach the whole Bible or none of it, right? Well, leaders are to set the example for giving. If you're telling your people to give, you better be in front of the line giving. And that's what King Hezekiah did. Then he turned in verse 4 to the people. He commanded the people who dwell in Jerusalem to contribute to the support for the priests and the Levites, that they might devote themselves to the law of the Lord. So what this tells us is that, for lack of better terminology, they hadn't paid the preacher in a long time. They hadn't paid the priests and Levites. So what we're going to learn is, well, one thing, the priests were allowed, in fact, it was a command of the Lord, to take from the offerings. There were certain offerings that the priests were to take portions of. Here's the bad example of that. You remember Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and how they were taking more than they were supposed to. So the priest, well, there hadn't been an offering given in the temple in years. Wasn't no offering to get your portion from. And the other way that the priests were supported was through the tithe, the annual tithe. And 10% of all that you make, and I'm guessing that was not obeyed either. And so he starts in Jerusalem and he says, look, we got to get this restarted. Now he couldn't say anything to Ephraim and Manasseh and Naphtali. He wasn't the king there. But he could start at Jerusalem for Judah, the southern kingdom, and says, we're going to give, and not only are we going to support the Judah priest, but we're going to support those ones that go to Ephraim, and we're going to support those ones that go to Naphtali. And I couldn't help but think, there's a great application here is, you support your local leaders, but you also help support leaders out on the mission field. Others that are doing the work of the Lord. So he started, King Hezekiah, I'm not asking you to do something I'm not willing to do. So I'm going to do it first, and then I'm asking you to give so that we can support these priests so they can commit their lives and all of their time to the service of the Lord. So verses 5 and 6 talk about that. As soon as the commandment was circulated, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of grain and wine. This was to go to the priest. These were offerings, but the priest could take a portion of those offerings as their own, oil and honey and so forth, produce of the field, and they brought in abundantly the tithe of everything. So here's the tithe, 10%. Now, get this in your head. I am old enough to have been pounded by a church. Who knows what I'm talking about? Y'all have no clue what they're talking about. There was a given Sunday, and the first church that I pastored used to do this. There was a given Sunday, and mine was usually right around Christmas, and people would bring in, and they might bring in groceries, they brought in real stuff, not gift cards. They brought in real stuff, and it was called pounding the preacher. Well, this is kind of like what they were doing for the priest, is they were bringing real stuff, like grain and oil and honey and different things that you would use to live. So go ahead and go to the next slide. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. In verses 7 through 10, it begins to talk about, abundantly the tithe of everything, verse 5, verse 6, and the children of Israel and Judah who dwelt in the cities of Judah brought the tithe of oxen and sheep. Now, what you could do, you really couldn't cut off a tenth of your oxen, could you? I'm going to cut off his back leg and take that. You bought them out. So in other words, there was a way to buy out the animals. You got to keep your ox. You got to keep your, was it sheep? Is that what it said there? Yeah. You got to keep those, so you didn't cut off 10% of your sheep, but you bought it out with grain, with oil, yes, with wine, different things that you could use to pay the equivalent 10%. Now later, when they actually started using money, you could do that with coins. Are you ready? You remember when Jesus turned the money changers over? That's what was going on, is they were buying their 10% per se, but it had to be in Jewish money. So these people had Roman money, and the exchange rate was exorbitant. So just for an example, when you go to Mexico, that's not even a good example. When you go to Europe and you have to exchange to the euro, do they take dollars? Do they take dollars? They'll take dollars, but they like euros better. But is the exchange rate still like $1.50 to a euro?
Yeah, they're $1.
Okay, so it takes you $1.50 to buy a euro. But what they were doing was, to buy a Jewish coin was going to cost you 5 Roman coins. And that's what made Jesus so angry. That's why he called it a den of thieves. Well, all right, I went down that rabbit hole, so I won't get back out of that. What I'm really wanting you to see is how much these folks gave. So, verse 7, in the 3rd month, they began laying them in heaps. Y'all know what heaps are? It's what your laundry looks like right now. Whether it's dirty or clean, my laundry's in heaps. So piles, they had piles and piles and piles of this stuff everywhere. So King Hezekiah, we'll get back to him, and it says, when King Hezekiah saw this, well, it would be like you walk in on a Sunday and we got a pile of wheat out in the foyer. You know, we got 3 sheep over here tied up. We got to do something a little better than this, okay? So King Hezekiah says, let's make some rooms. Probably wasn't live animals. Let's make some rooms, and we're going to put, the vegetables over here, and we're going to put the fruit over there, and we're going to put the grain back there. Let's put the wine over here and the oil over there. Let's put some organization to this thing. But the point being is it was piling up. It was just because the people were giving. Which reminds me is, when we get our heart set on giving, and I don't really have anything to preach about here with this church, but when people set their heart on giving, we never will lack for funds. And we have a problem around here. We've been so blessed with funds that we never think about not having money. It's kind of like we've always been able to buy pretty much what we wanted, which is a great blessing. It's a great blessing to have because people have given faithfully. And so just when churches, when people give in heaps, well, they're going to enjoy a heap of blessings. And it's really the story of this church, honestly. I've never experienced anything like that. By the way, useless trivia. What's Sunday? Guess what Sunday is? Some of y'all don't remember this, but some of you should. What's Sunday? My wife didn't know either. If I had any feelings, they'd be hurt. This Sunday, I'll have been your pastor 20 years. I became the pastor first. Am I getting old? I became your pastor June the 6th. I think that's right. June the 6th, 2006. I was the ripe old age of 35. Now you know how old I am now. So, yep, 20 years. 20 years this Sunday. So anyway, that's totally off base. When a church gives in heaps, we'll be blessed in heaps. And I have been so blessed to be your pastor for 20 years. I really have. Now, y'all don't fire me yet, because there's only one guy ahead of me in longevity. He's sitting right over there. He's got, according to him, he's got me by 2 years. So, all right, next slide. Verse 11. Did I miss anything? Okay, so they're gonna get these rooms prepared. That's verse 11. Hezekiah commanded them. What's verse 10 say? And Azariah the chief priest answered and said, since the people began to bring the offerings into the house of the Lord, we have had enough to eat and have. Oh yeah, he's answering the question. So all this was for the priest. See, they were getting from the offerings, getting the tithes. And so King Hezekiah says, what's all this pile of stuff laying around? And the priest is answering him. He said, we've had plenty to eat since all the people started giving. We've had plenty to eat, and there's so much left over, for the Lord has blessed his people, and what is left is in great abundance. I don't know what they ended up doing with it. But so Hezekiah he said, let's prepare some rooms in the house of the Lord, and they prepared them. The rooms were already there. It's not like they had to go build new rooms. They were there, and that's what they were there for, is to store these things. So verse 12, then they faithfully brought in the offerings, the tithes, and the dedicated things, and then Conaniah, the Levite, had charge of them. Now, I'm not going to read all those names, but here's what we get starting in 11 through 14. So we've got all this, quote, money and stuff. What are we going to do with it? Well, King Hezekiah says we got to put some people in charge, and the ones who are collecting it and making sure it's stored correctly, there were 12 of them. There were 2 supervisors, and there were 10 helpers. That's verses 12 and 13. All those strange Hebrew names, that's what these guys were. They were collecting the offerings and storing the offerings. So we call them treasurers and secretaries and finance committees today. Well, verses 14 and 15 names 7 other men. 1 leader, supervisor, and 6 of his helpers, assistants, and they were in charge of distributing the offerings. To whom? Well, these offerings were for the priest. So they were going to distribute them to the priest. So what we learn right here is that we not only need us to give to the Lord, but we have to set up a way in which that we account for the giving, and we distribute that giving as it had been given. So it's not only are we faithful to give to the Lord, but we've got to be faithful in taking care. So when you give your offering to the church, there's got to be somebody in charge of accounting for that. He's sitting on the back row. And we've got to have some people who are in charge of overseeing the finances. They're spread out through here. All of our deacons is the finance committee. Now, the secretary does a lot of the hands-on writing of checks and such. But we got to have a good system of checks and balances and make sure that everything is done honestly and honorably. And we do have a good system here. But that's a part of obeying the Lord as well. So this is what verses 11 through 14 is talking about. And I'm not going to read all of those names for you. You can read those later. But they were going to distribute the offerings, and now the thing about it was not all the priests lived in Jerusalem. They didn't have like Priest Street in Jerusalem and everybody lived in little apartments there. They were scattered all over. They lived all over Judah. Some of them went up to Ephraim and Manasseh in the northern kingdom. Some of them went back up there. And they deserved, in fact, it was God's command that they receive this portion as well. So we're going to look at that next. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So, fairness in distributing the offerings to the priesthood. Look at verse 16. Besides those males from 3 years old and up. Now, why did they start counting at 3? I honestly can't tell you for sure. One idea is that was about the average age when a child no longer nursed. Now, I'm not an expert here, but I don't know of many 3-year-olds that are living off of breast milk. I think they're going to get some kind of substitute on the side. I'm not saying it's wrong to breastfeed a child to 3. I don't care. I'm just saying they got to have something other than that. Others say that this is saying that this is the time in which that you started counting a child. And that's a really sad statement because it's talking about the high number of infant deaths. So what he's basically saying is when somebody gets 3 years old, they get counted in the priesthood. How do you get into the priesthood? You got to be of the tribe of Levi. Really, the priesthood, you got to be of the family of Aaron. And so what they're doing is counting up the people who get fed. That's what this is talking about. So he says, besides those males from 3 years old and up who were written in the genealogy, they kept track of all this. And they distributed to everyone who entered the house of the Lord his daily portion for the work of his service by his division. You went to work at the temple, you got your pay. And to the priests who were written in the genealogies according to their father's house, and to the Levites from 20 years old and up according to their work by their divisions. So the baby priests, 3-year-olds, they were paid through their father priest. Once you reach 20 years old, you a man now, and you get your pay in your name. And to all who were written in the genealogies, their little ones, their wives, their sons and daughters, the whole company of them, for in their faithfulness they sanctified themselves in holiness. Also for the sons of Aaron, the priest, who were in the fields of the common land of their cities. Now that's like saying where I come from. So this wasn't Jerusalem. This wasn't near Jerusalem. This was out in backwoods country. And can't you kind of understand how that the Jerusalem priest might get their pay first and maybe more, and the backwoods priest didn't get theirs? Well, this is what this is addressing. He's saying, look, don't skip over those priests who were in the fields of the common lands of their cities. That means out in the country. In every single city, there were men who were designated by name to distribute portions to all the males among the priests and to all who were listed by genealogies among the priests. Now, that's a lot of detail, but just get it back to this. They wanted to do it right. That's the point, is we're not going to just kind of do it. We're going to look down into the details and the genealogies and find every priest who lives wherever, and we're going to make sure he gets his portion. Now, there may have been the reason that the heaping of all this stuff was happening, and they were having to find storages. They couldn't find all the priests. And so they went out looking for them. And they said, genealogy. Okay, so there was a family of Caniah, and he used to live over, by the old elm tree, take a left, just past. And they went looking for these guys. And can you imagine waking up one morning, you're a priest, you're a part of the family of Aaron, hadn't received anything from anybody, and guys show up and say, hey, we owe you some money. Usually people show up at my house, they say, you owe me some money. So they were trying to do things right. So they were trying to do things right. Which brings us back to where we started tonight, and we'll call it done. And verse 20 says, thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judah, and he did what was good and right and true. See, this is what this is describing. Now, I know that King Hezekiah didn't do every bit of this, but he was in charge of all this, and he made sure that the people who were doing the logistical work of it was doing it right. He was doing it good and right and true before his God. And every work that he begun in the service of the house of God and the law and the commandments to seek his God, he did it with all his heart, and so he prospered. Last slide, I think. So, a little review real quick. Revival. Israel has experienced a revival brought about by, I'm not going to lay it all on Hezekiah's shoulders here. I don't think he deserves that much credit, but he certainly led a revival. He brought about by the people's willingness to once again worship the Lord. I would suspect that there were a lot of people in Israel at that time, lived during King Ahaz's time, and they didn't like what was going on. But what could they do about it? They couldn't do anything about it. Sometimes we feel that way in our country, don't we? We don't like what's going on, but what can we do about it? We can always vote. I get that. I'm not saying we actually have more ability to change things around here than they did. And so there were a lot of people that when King Hezekiah stepped up and he said, we're going to change things around here, I think there were a lot of people cheering on King Hezekiah. The revival, what we looked at tonight, resulted in more reforms. It wasn't just a couple of weeks of emotional hoopla. There were real changes that occurred. People went home and they got rid of their personal idols. And if there were idols in their neighborhood, they got rid of them. And that was that was a dangerous thing. Say it out right. That was a dangerous thing for people who lived in Ephraim and Manasseh. And these were not God-fearing kings that lived in these areas. So, giving to the Lord in heaps. That's how we ought to give. Give to the Lord, so we have to just heap it up in storerooms. And make sure God's money is honestly collected and distributed. We saw that. Taking care of the pastor, other paid staff of the church. You've always done that. Has to be said when it comes up. So, comments or questions? I'm done. All right, well, just a reminder, next week we'll be in Vacation Bible School, so we'll always all be busy working in Bible school. But I will say that as I segue into announcements, we will have an adult Bible school. If you don't know, this year's theme in Bible school is creation. That's pretty exciting. And so I'm going to lead the adult class, and we're going to be studying. I've got a kind of a video series. It's got a short video that goes along with it. And we're going to be studying Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and a part of chapter 3, but basically focusing on chapters 1 and 2 and creation. So I think we're going to be meeting in the choir room. That's where we met last time. And the way we'll do it is the kids start at 6:30, and they have their little opening assembly, and you feel free to go to that. We'll start our class around 7 o'clock, somewhere in that neighborhood. We'll start around 7 o'clock, and then we won't go till 8:30 as long as they go, but we'll go till about 8 o'clock, and then let you guys be free and kind of go to the closing assembly, kind of participate, be a part of Bible school, see what's going on, and but we'll have a class as well. So other announcements: no Wednesday night meals in the month of June, but if you work in Bible school, you can eat Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night of next week. We'll be serving meals at 5:15 this next week, mainly for the kids and workers. So there will be a VBS work night tomorrow, 6 to 8 p.m. What else? A little bit later in the month, just to keep you abreast of this, is the teens, led by Brother Zach, are going to be doing a local mission trip this year. They're going to do things within our community and among our people. So if you have some jobs that you would like to, I'm probably going to have some corn ready about that time. No, I wouldn't do that to them. But if you have something that you'd like for them to do around your house, get with Brother Zach on that. You can tell me and it won't help any. But if you'll get with Brother Zach, he'll put you on the list. And so they've got several things like that. June the 15th through the 18th are the dates on that. Believe it or not, the American Baptist Association is just around the corner, June the 22nd through the 25th. When we get closer to that time, I will send all of you an agenda, as in the schedule for the ABA meeting. And that way you can actually go online if you want to and get it now. Go to abaptist.org, go to events, go to the ABA meeting, and you'll find it. You can download it, print it, whatever you want to do. But I'll stick it in an email and thing and send it y'all's way. But I'm not going to do it now because y'all lose it. I'm going to send it probably the week before. And it'll give you a breakdown of what's happening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And if you remember that Wednesday night, whatever date that is, 23rd, we've relocated our Wednesday night service. I haven't told you all this yet, but I think you know the ABA meeting is in Hot Springs, the Hot Springs Convention Center this year. So good opportunity. It's the 100th meeting of the American Baptist Association. So it's kind of a big one, and there's going to have some historical things going on. And if you want to go, you'll meet missionaries from all over the world, and they'll come in on Hot Springs, and I haven't seen any of them yet, but they usually come about 2 or 3 weeks early, and usually they'll stop by or call me or text me, but I haven't seen any of them yet. And then also the last Sunday of this month, June the 28th, church is going to give Ainsley Viscardis a baby shower, and that's at 2 p.m. Other announcements? Yes, Vanessa.
So tonight is the first night that our mission has been here.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're bringing several kids. They weren't able to come tonight, but we're going to need some more people to rotate through the nursery and through Children's Chapel and possibly Explorers at times.
And possibly what?
Explorers on Wednesday nights.
Okay. Okay.
If you have in your heart to, these places are already needing people, so
Yes.
we really need to step up and help those parts of our church.
Brittany Garrigus is in charge of nursery. Vicki Castleberry is in charge of Children's Chapel. Dee Schimmel is in charge of the Explorers. So those 3 people, and they don't always need teachers, but they might need helpers. People just to be there and kind of organize and help. And sometimes your job is going to hold a baby all night. The baby's just not having a good night, and you just got to hold them. And so would you step up and help? And when I should have mentioned that, but Alejandro and his group are back with us, and you pray about that. I know that we're happy to have them. We're absolutely happy to have them. But I know that they want their own place, and I get that. So you pray that we can find a place for them. But make sure that you make them feel welcome. Some of them speak good English, some of them don't. But, say hola, shake their hand, thank them for being here. What else? Any other announcements? If not, then say good night to our online audience. Thanks for being with us tonight. Prayer concerns, send them our way. You can do so by our website at fbcbryant.net. And there's a place that you can put your prayer requests there, and we'll be happy to add them to our prayer concerns. Have a good night.